Lyle, can you hear us? Yeah, Sadie, maybe you could move it on while he's figuring out his connection.
Sure. Let me grab a packet. Well, everyone, while we wait for our chair as your vice chair, I would like to call this meeting to order. And I think our first action item for our consideration is approval of the policy committee meeting minutes for July 22nd, 2025.
I've moved to approve.
Second, any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. And now we have item C in our agenda, which is public comment. Do we have any members of the public in person or online?
Yeah, I get those.
So this year?
Is that appropriate to have somebody?
I'm asking, I don't know the answer.
I'm seeking staff's advice.
Sarah is an alternate from Trans District, in this case, she wants, it's up to you, I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, I think as long as you're not intending to represent the chariot.
I can say it as part of my public comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
My name is Sarah Duncan, and I am representing myself and not the district in my public comment. My zip code is 97302. I want to give public comment about the proposed list of projects. At this point in my life, I am very lucky not to be paratransit dependent. However, I have a disability. My disability is narcolepsy with cataplexy. And if you don't know what that disability is, it's degenerative. So over the course of my life, I will continue to struggle with my ability to stay awake or to be asleep when I am supposed to be. And so a large part of the reason why I'm passionate about transit is because someday I will lose the ability to drive. And that has been told to me by a couple of different doctors. And so although I am safe at this point in my life, when the day comes that I am not, I will be transit dependent. I think that it's very important that anybody who needs access to vehicles that are able to get them to medical appointments are incredibly important. If a vehicle were to break down on the way to a specialist appointment that maybe you waited for 6 or 8 months, that can be a life or death situation for many people, especially if it's cardiac, especially if it's neurological, like my condition is. And so although I am not a user at this point in time, I am not blind to the fact that the one minority that almost everybody, if they're lucky enough to live long enough, will join is that of the disabled community. And so I want to urge that we include the funding for paratransit buses for all those who may need them now and in the future. Thank you.
Sarah, any other folks here for public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we can move on to agenda item D, amendments to the SKATS federal fiscal year 2024-29 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Plan.
So yeah, I'm going to share my screen in a moment. There's 3 amendments that we're going to review and ask for approval on. I just wanted to point out before I share, on screen we have Kumar Ratnasamy, who's a project engineer. He's here to help out if there's questions related to the Verta Lane project, especially like on the more technical end of things. So just wanted to move that out, and then I'll get started with my presentation. Doing that. We want it to do that. Okay, so the first amendment that we're reviewing today is Amendment 25-14. And this project is ODOT transit section project. They're the public transportation division of ODOT is handling this project. So the amendment here is a name change. So it's the names crossed out on the screen, and then there's a new name that's been given to the project. And then a change in the total cost of the project, reducing it by about $650,000. The reason is for the change in cost is because there was an estimate made when it was originally programmed to the STIP and the TIP, and now that ODOT has more information about what the actual grant is going to look like, they're reducing it to the amount to match the grant, the actual amount in the grant. So no impact to SKATS discretionary funding for this project. And it's funding that's going to be, once it's implemented, it's used for transit service for people with special needs, seniors, and other transit dependent populations. The next amendment is 25-15. This is an ODOT ADA curb ramp project, and we'll be a little bit familiar. We've had a few of these curb ramp projects come through. This one's specific for design work that's going to take place on locations around Northwest Oregon throughout Region 2. I highlighted a couple of the specific locations or corridors that impact the SKATS planning area, but mostly it's pretty broad. Some of the locations are down in Eugene, some are on the coast as far as like Tillamook and Astoria. So the action here is to add funding for this project. It's at $26 million that ODOT's using bond proceeds to get started with the work, and then they're going to later reimburse that with or pay back the bond with federal funding, which is why it's being added to the STIP. So I have one more slide, and it's just to note that this is a multi-year effort that ODOT's undergoing with curb ramps. They're replacing like 26 or 27,000 curb ramps around the state, and it's the result of a legal settlement from 2017. And so this is just ODOT carrying that out in action. Okay, and then the third one is 25-16, another familiar project. This is the Verta Lane project that's taking place in Keizer. And the action here is to reduce the construction phase by $850,000 and move 300,000 of those of that funding to an other phase, which is going to be used for tree work along the corridor. And then the remainder of $550,000 is for stormwater design work that's being completed as part of the preliminary engineering phase. So that's all the slides I have for now, but if there's questions before we go to approval, happy to do those.
Excuse me, your Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, please.
On your slide, you talk about reducing it, but then on the purpose of amendment on my sheet, it doesn't say that. Well, why isn't that? Just didn't include it.
I thought it did. We'll pull that up. Are you looking at
Page 1 of 25-16, purpose of amendment. Doesn't show any. Oh, no, forgive me, it does, but you said 800,000.
850,000?
This is 550,000.
So that's what.
The reduction is 850,000, and 550 of that is going to the preliminary engineering phase, and then the 300,000 is going to the other phase.
It didn't match what you had up there. That's what all I wanted to know. Thank you.
I have
And I'm not against it.
Oh, Lyle is here. Can we like turn the meeting over to Lyle?
Well, Lyle, can you, I just sent him a message asking if he has some audio problems.
I think I've got it all fixed up now.
Oh, great.
Sorry about
Okay.
that, guys. Right at the crucial moment, it just goes blank. So,
I just have a question. That's maybe a point of curiosity, if that's okay, Chair.
absolutely. Go ahead,
All
Sarah.
right. How many times have we seen changes to Verta Lane? I feel like we've been talking about this for ages,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's like, it sounds like we're getting to a high number of changes. Is there a typical number of changes that projects experience? Is this high?
I would answer by saying it's more than usual, yes. And some of that relates to the cost increases that took place for the construction phase. So it's more than typical, yes. Is the
Yeah.
short answer.
Like a half dozen?
I don't know. I'd have to look, but I think that's probably accurate.
Like
Yeah.
in the neighborhood? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, between like times that funding has been added or the project phase has been slipped or other changes, but yeah.
Okay, well, that confirms I'm not all the way crazy yet.
We
Ready
definitely.
for it to go out the door, can I just say that?
Keizer is too. Oh, I mean, why not just get a twofer on that?
And for those of us who sat in this committee over the last 4 years during COVID, it was never like this prior to COVID. But with the cost escalations and then funding shortages, it's been a pretty turmoil-full area or region right now in construction. It's been total crazy. So is there other comments or for the amendments to SKATS on this?
See
Do I
anyone
hear
in the room?
I'd make a motion to approve the amendments.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? I'm going to ask for anybody who opposes this, please say nay. And for all those who approve, please say yay.
Yay.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
So thank you, guys. Next up, item E, the 2025-2026 UPW amendment funding award. So Mike Jaffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we adopted our annual planning work program in March, and that document had the activities we would do and the funding outlined. This item is to make some adjustments to that funding, which I think all of you may appreciate because we're returning money. We're both returning money to the TIP. So I'll just go through item by item. So we always get our FTA money late from ODOT. So they told us that our FTA funds are increasing a little bit by about 5,000. Then we had some 2024 funds in our TIP, in our UPWP. Based on some analysis, I don't think we're going to need those funds. So I'm going to return those funds back to the TIP for general program use. And item 3 has to do with the match. So earlier this year, I sent to all your staffs the amount of new STBG funds in 2026 that we needed for the UPWP, and it was that amount was in our TIP. So I'm reducing that amount by 170,000. That means consequently the match to those funds are going to be reduced. So the match was going to be 18,000 per jurisdiction. This reduction in the federal funds also reduces the match by about $3,136. So we figure all of you would be happy about that because the match went up quite a bit this year because we have to now also match the PL funds we get through ODOT. So we have kind of two funding sources, PL funds and STBG funds. This is the first year we have to match 50% at 50% level the PL funds. Past years, the amounts were around 10, 11,000 and they jumped up to 18,000 and now I'm reducing them back to 15,000 with this change in the UPWP. Or we talked with City of Turner and they've agreed to increase their match from $500 to $2,500. And right now we're in the process of working with the other MPOs about returning some funds that was used for OMPOC, which is the MPO consortium. There's about $400,000. I don't have the precise amount. And we just had a meeting about a week ago, and those funds are also going to be returned back to the MPOs for planning, because these are planning funds. So I'm gonna have to incorporate that in this amendment. So a lot of changes to the amendment to UPWP with these dollar amounts, but it's all good news. One, returning funds back to our TIP to actually put toward projects, and two, the match amounts are gonna go down compared to the ones I thought they were gonna be earlier this year. So with that, it's more informational, but I will wanted to let the PC know about this and see if you have any questions or comments.
Any questions, comments from Mike?
Process, Joe.
So, hearing none.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I will go ahead and plan.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Plan.
Next up, item F, the Title VI plan. So, Kim.
Great, thank you very much, everybody. I have today an update to our Title VI plan, and I just have a little bit of brief background, then we'll give a little bit of the detail of what's going on. Just in general, Title VI refers to the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964. It prohibits discrimination in our work. Any organization that receives federal funds is required to have a Title VI plan in place. And we've had a formal Title VI plan in place since 2009. I wanted to give you just a little, we've talked about, because Title VI plan has come up a couple of times in the last 2 years period. So just briefly in the last 2 years, in September of 2023, we were actually audited by ODOT's Department of Equity and Civil Rights. So they reviewed our Title VI and our program. And we passed that audit, and we had a minor change that they suggested. It was about due to update our plan anyway. So I brought that to the policy committee, and it was updated in October of 2023. And then our certification review that we have quarterly for the SKATS MPO occurred last November 2024, and they also reviewed our Title VI plan. And actually out of that review, we got our final report for that earlier in this year, in March 2025. In our final report from our certification report, there was a corrective action. It's actually the lone corrective action of our review to update, make a couple of corrections to the Title VI plan. I'm going to give them in just a minute. Just briefly, they were mostly procedural. They were not about policy. It was just something that had been overlooked in ODOT and Federal Highway and what we had in Oregon. So this, in July, I made updates to our current plan based on the corrective action. And in July, I submitted the plan back to actually ODOT's Department of Equity and Civil Rights. That's Brenda Glessner, who's in charge, and she reviewed it on our behalf. She made a couple of slight suggestions and corrections that I had just to fine tune it. And I took it to the TAC this month. They reviewed it just to see what. So in your packet is a very marked up copy. I gave you the full meal deal here, showing the edits, but more particularly where there is a change that I've made that addresses our corrective action, because that's the key point of why we're updating it at this point. I have a called out box that says why that change came through and why it was meant to address something that Federal Highway indicated for us. So most briefly, they, as I said, they're mostly procedural. So for example, on page 9 and we have a chart that says we have an executive director, we have a Title VI authorized representative of the organization, and we previously the chart was incorrect. We didn't have the, we needed to clarify that the executive director and Mike Jaffe, who is a Title VI officer, we had clear and unfettered access, to each other and needed to be in the chart. And on page 12, the main change was that we needed to clarify that if you receive a complaint about discrimination that's reflective of the MPO's work, or I think we can accept anybody's complaint. That we don't investigate the complaint ourselves because previously we had a review in our document that said, we'll take a look at it and we'll send it to ODOT or we'll let other people know. But instead, we have to be clear that if we receive any complaint, that we direct it immediately to Federal Highway Administration. They will review it and they'll determine where that review needs to go. It will make it to ODOT, they process it individually, but they work with us. To date, we've never had a Title VI complaint for the MTO, but it's specific that process be documented, and that's why there's so many processes in this. This is a very appendix-heavy document. And that is, and then I realized in this copy that you got, I'm sorry, they're not page numbers on the appendices. That'll be the final document. I think you numbered and bookmarked in PDF. The appendix number 1 is the most recent assurances against that we will not discriminate as best we can that come directly from the transportation. So that's that came from ODOT gave them to me and they come from the Department of Transportation. So appendix 1 is a requirement in this document. It comes that text all comes from them. There are several sub appendices that basically refer in case we had subcontractors, or it covers every possible aspect of kind of work being done on a federal level. The appendix that's number 9 had the previous process of what would we do if we had a complaint, and it's obviously been updated because it previously would say that we would update. Now it says we would refer those to. And then I added yet one more appendix. The last one is the information that comes directly from FHWA's site on how Title VI implements UC. So it's a frequently asked question saying what they do, how long it typically takes, how they will respond to anyone who has filed a complaint. So I realize that it's a little hard to read in the marked up version, but are there any questions about any of the changes or the comments that were tagged out of that?
In Appendix E, there is the second deleted bullet for the Executive Order 13166. The language is kind of similar to the language that was added in page 6 implementation strategies, compliance, and enforcement elements. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that shift.
The appendix, sorry, it's the first appendix of the assurances?
So Appendix E, assurances.
Yes.
The second bullet that was removed there, Executive Order 13166, improving access to services for persons with limited English proficiency, reads in a similar manner to what was added on page 6 of the Title VI plan itself. Courts have interpreted the Title VI from. I was just wondering if you could speak to that.
Yes. The executive order itself, 13166, has been rescinded. So as an executive order, it no longer is.
Okay.
However, case law, Title VI case law was a recommendation from ODOT, is that that just because that executive order has been rescinded, it's still illegal to discriminate against somebody based on their language skills. And that has been upheld by the courts as a Title VI provision. So the recommendation was to include language that says you need to be able to provide meaningful access to somebody who does not speak English as appropriate. And that's why we have, as many public agencies do, we have standby translation services if necessary. If somebody came to our front desk and they spoke Romanian, then we could call a phone number and we can put a Romanian translator on the line to have a three-way party, so that we have translation services. Yes.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Anything else?
Any other comments or concerns for Kim?
Sure wants to make a comment. Oh, no.
Okay.
Nothing that really adds to the conversation.
The action today would be to ask that these changes are, the proposed changes are acceptable, that we'll accept them. Give you a clean copy in which all of our documentation, one of our corrective actions had a page that did not have a signature on it. So they will all be signed by our interim executive director. There is no required public comment period for a Title VI plan. It's a requirement that we have. So to adopt by resolution, it will also then begin the process of us working with ODOT to officially reconcile the corrective action from our federal group. So ODOT will review it. If they agree that it's also in compliance, it will go to Federal Highway to be checked off the list.
And you, Mr. Chair, if I may, so do you anticipate it being checked off? Or, I mean, there's obviously conflict between the federal and the state departments of transportation and the language we use because of the administrations. Is this going to take care of that?
I believe that we've met all of the requirements for the corrective action from Federal Highway. So, and I've already had ODOT review the documentation, and they are up to date. She's the one who gave me the what's been rescinded, what should be edited out, and what should be put in based on the most recent directives that are coming from the federal administration. So I think we've tied all the pieces together. So yes, the answer is it should be fine. Yes. And it's true because previously several executive orders have been rescinded, but Title VI as a federal act, as a legal act is in place. And we need a Title VI plan. So.
So Kim, I just like to tell you thank you for the great job you've done on this and preparing it. I know it's been really difficult with the change of leadership on the Federal Highway Administration. So balancing that and only having one corrective action says a lot for your work. So thank you. So moving forward, do we have an approval?
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion that we adopt resolution 25-17 for the updated Title VI plan, direct staff to submit it to ODOT for review as part of the process and addressing the corrective action from US DOT's 2025 certificate review of SKATS.
Second by Cameron.
Perfect. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is there any nays? Motion passes unanimous. Great job, Kim. Up next, item G, project funding for inclusion in draft for future years 2027 to 2032 for the MTIP. Mr. Steve.
Okay, so I have some more slides for this one. This is a little bit longer presentation. A lot of it's going to be recapped though. A lot of this is going to sound familiar. So just bear with me. Table setting, and feel free to ask questions as we go through. But the action for today is to review 3 options on which priority projects and supplemental illustrative projects to include in the draft TIP document, and then to group projects for inclusion in the document and direct staff to prepare our air quality conformity determination, which goes along with the form. So this is just a quick overview of what we're going to cover. I'm going to try to go fast in parts of this, but we'll talk about the funding available for projects and some of the variables impacting that, although that's going to be really brief. We covered that in pretty long depth at the last meeting. Talk about the project review process really briefly, and just touch on where we've been, how we got here, how we came to the project list that we have available now. And that'll incorporate some overview of just our recent TAC and policy committee discussions and different tweaks and changes that we've made to the proposals throughout the process, because we want to really just map out like how we went through the process, how we scored, how we made changes based on input that we received from the TAC and the policy committee. And then we'll wind up by looking at the options that are available for approval. And then at the very end, we'll ask for us to approve the project to move forward. So you've seen this slide before. I'm not going to dwell on it. It just breaks down the estimated revenue available in the first column, the funding that's being set aside for regional programs and reserved for any cost overruns for projects that are ongoing, either current projects or new ones that are going to be added to the TIF. And on the right, it talks about our estimated levels of funding that we used as really just our targets when we were developing these scenarios and how we put that together. And I'll just note there's I included it in one of the attachments. But I'm not going to really cover it with the slides, but it's the overview of all the variables that impact our estimation, things like the upcoming federal transportation bill, our limitation rate, redistribution, just all the unknowns that we sort of know are in play when we're talking about our revenue estimates here. Okay, so a real quick overview of the project review process. The development and testing of our funding scenarios has really been an iterative process. So where it began is with the evaluation criteria that was utilized as a tool in scoring on a technical basis and a qualitative basis, the applications that came to SKATS. And the policy committee adopted that criteria back at the January meeting of this year. The TAC did their scoring of applications in March and then had a review of the results at the April TAC meeting. Some of the other relevant factors that are in addition to the evaluation criteria are things like geographic distribution of projects, the sharing of funding between jurisdictions, the relative size of or cost of proposals and how they fit in with our available funding. Some of the projects were larger price tags, some were smaller, and we've kind of worked through the list to come up with a list of proposed projects that fits within our funding that's available. And then the last factor is matching requests to specific funding sources and the year in which the funding is going to be available for spending. So in addition to that, we, as mentioned, adjusted funding options and proposals based on input that we've received since really the June meeting with the TAC and then conversations with the policy committee here as well. Yeah, please.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. Mel Fuller. This is my first meeting here with you guys. I'm wondering if, since I'm new and I've not yet met to be onboarded yet, there's so many acronyms. I don't know what they mean. Sorry, can you just like.
You're not alone.
Maybe one throw the longhand name in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's ones you want me to call out specifically, let me know. Probably the one I'll say the most is the MTIP or TIP, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program.
Okay.
And that's basically our short range listing of projects that are scheduled to receive federal funding.
Got it.
Yeah, so this is our commitment to funding projects that are included in our long range plan, which is a 20-year outlook. And this is a shorter 4 to 6 year outlook in the MTIP document.
Thank you. I don't want to make the meeting last longer at my sake, but just every once in a while, it'd be nice.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the year before, the session before Bob Jensen was chair of the House Water Committee in 2001 and 2003 as well. But he had a cup out there, and if you used an acronym in testifying before the committee, made you put 50 cents or a buck. And legislative council told him he couldn't do that anymore. I would move we do that.
She just gave me a list. So that's very helpful.
But then you don't need to, it's hard to read that while you're trying to listen.
It's okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so I'm gonna just recap our technical advisory committee, which is the TAC, and our policy committee discussions from the last few months. So in June, the TAC developed 4 funding scenarios for initial consideration. And then we came back to this body, the policy committee, and reviewed and received some feedback. When we went into the July TAC meeting, we made a funding recommendation or the TAC made a funding recommendation out of that as an outcome of that meeting. And it included a list of priority and supplemental illustrative projects. And I'll define those in a couple slides. We took that recommendation back to this committee, the policy committee, in July. We heard some feedback. We made some updates to the recommendation. And based on that, the technical advisory committee earlier this month reviewed 3 options, funding options, discussed preferences, gave their feedback. And then the purpose of today's meeting is to review what the TAC looked at, hear what their thoughts on the options were, and then ultimately make a decision on which option to fund. And I'll note that they're all really fairly similar to one another. So there's just a few different questions at the end that define the differences between the 3 options. Okay, so going back to the June Technical Advisory Committee meeting, we developed 4 scenarios of projects. So all the ones that say yes next to them. And this table just compares what those 4 scenarios look like. The 5 projects that are highlighted green were included in all 4 of the scenarios. So those were priorities based on the scoring, based on jurisdictional feedback. They were included in all 4 of the initial scenarios. The yellow projects were included in either 2 or 3 of the scenarios. And then the ones that aren't colored or don't have a yes in any of the boxes, those 5 projects or 6 projects weren't included in any of the funding scenarios at that time. So like I said, we reviewed the funding scenarios with the policy committee. The group generally at that point agreed that the projects that were highlighted green on the previous slide should be prioritized, and projects that are highlighted yellow would be considered additional options for funding moving forward. Some of the other conversation points that we had at that time was a request to include funding for the Court and Hazel Green roundabout project through at least the preliminary engineering stage just to get started. It's a larger price project for construction. So the feeling there was that if we could help the county to move forward with some of the design work, even if we're not funding the construction at this point, it would be helpful to get the project started in this TIP timeframe. We heard from Polk County expressing support for the Orchard Heights project. Part of that preference was to close a sidewalk gap in an area with a lot of development along Orchard Heights, and then to also help address the geographic distribution of projects so that we have a project that's in West Salem. And then lastly, we heard Salem's priorities in terms of their projects that were rising to the top in the scenarios. And they were the commercial street urban upgrades was their first priority, followed by the Fisher Road sidewalk infill, and then finally the Orchard Heights pedestrian improvements project. So in July, staff presented a funding proposal to the Technical Advisory Committee, and it included a priority project list, which was the list of projects that would formally move forward for funding. They would be fully programmed in the draft TIP document, which would mean they would be listed in the STIP. They would have specific funding years for project phases, funding sources identified. So full MPO programming for those projects. the supplemental illustrative projects, the reason for having this secondary list was to basically identify projects that we would include in our internal financial plan. We wouldn't fully program them to a specific year or funding type at this point. And that's based on some question marks related to how much funding we'll have available, how many new requests for funding we might receive from existing projects. And essentially to maintain flexibility without overcommitting in the environment we're in right now, where we're waiting on our next federal transportation bill. So the TAC made 2 changes to the list that we presented them. They substituted the Orchard Heights project onto the priority list and put the Fisher Road project on the supplemental illustrative list. And then they added the preliminary engineering phase of the Wheatland Road multimodal project to the priority list as well. So this is the list of projects that were recommended by the TAC in July. 7 projects up at the top that are in green are the priority list projects. You'll see Wheatland is included here for the preliminary engineering phase, so not the full project. The remainder of Wheatland is on the yellow section, which is our supplemental illustrative list. And then also you'll see the Cordon Road project, as requested, was included on the supplemental list for preliminary engineering. The remainder are the non-funded projects at this time. So at our last meeting, we presented that list of projects and discussed some of the impacts that are affecting our revenue estimates and future potential cost increases to the projects that are in the current TIP document that may ask for additional construction funding. We sort of had a good conversation, touched on a lot of topics, but I think generally we talked about our approach to reserve funding. So how much do we set aside and sort of hold back and wait on? We touched on the likelihood of our current project list, any of those projects coming back, similar to Verta Lane, coming back and asking for additional funding when they get to the construction phase. And then we also talked about the degree to which the scoring criteria was utilized in the recommendation. So we had those discussion points, and then our in this green box down here was staff's sort of main takeaways that we took from that discussion, and it was 2 remaining questions essentially. One was the timing and prioritization between the Fisher Road and the Orchard Heights projects. And then the second one was the inclusion of the paratransit vehicle replacement project on the priority list. So we said at that point, we have a discussion with the TAC, and then we bring back some additional options. Okay, so this slide is the same project list that I just had on 2 slides ago. That was yellow, not funded, no color. So just included this here as option 1 to mention that we reshared the same recommendation with the TAC, just as a starting point. So this is exactly what we as a group discussed at the July meeting. And then beyond that, we incorporated the feedback that we received during that discussion and developed option 2, which includes, it's essentially the same as the first option, except it includes 2 new projects on the priority list, which are the Fisher Road sidewalk infill project for preliminary engineering only, and then the $1.5 million or partial funding for the paratransit replacement project. And then here, the yellow arrows, that shows where the remainder of those two projects are still on the supplemental list. They're still identified, but they wouldn't fit at this point onto the priority list. So we have the right-of-way and construction phases, build out of Fisher Road funded on the supplemental list, and then the remaining 1.3 million for the paratransit project on the supplemental list. Switching to option 3, it's extremely similar to option 2. And the difference here is, so the black arrow, Fisher Road, instead of being preliminary engineering only on the priority list, this is the full Fisher Road project on the priority list. And then Orchard Heights is instead on the priority list for preliminary engineering. And then down here in yellow, it is all the other phases through construction. So it's the key difference between the two is which of those projects, Orchard Heights or Fisher Road, would move towards construction first. And there's no changes between option 2 and 3 related to the paratransit projects. Those are the same. Okay, I'm really close to done with slides, but options 2 and 3, like I mentioned, they're really similar to one another in terms of total cost. They would both leave a little less flexibility compared to option 1, but just with our internal financial planning, we think that we can make those changes work. As I mentioned on the last slide, option 2 funds Orchard Heights through construction, and then Fisher Road, just the beginning stage of Fisher Road. And then option 3 is the reverse of that, where Fisher Road is funded through construction, and Orchard Heights is funded just through the preliminary design initial work to get started. When we talked about all these options with the TAC, our feedback from Salem was that they preferred option 3 specifically. Part of the reasoning was that Fisher Road is on a stretch of roadway where there's going to be some redevelopment at Fisher Road Park, or I guess initial development of Fisher Road Park. So, and that's sort of tentatively scheduled between now and I think 2030, that time range. So one of their preferences was, why don't we get this work started before park develops and sort of have it available, new sidewalks, pedestrian infrastructure in the lead up to the parks development. And then related to that, the Orchard Heights project, some of the input or more details that we got from Salem staff was that because of the entry into the Orchard Heights Park and a crossing, there's a bridge crossing for where there's going to be a pedestrian grid. Staff thought that potentially the preliminary engineering phase design could take a little longer than usual for Orchard Heights. And so for those two reasons, that's why Salem had the preference for option 3. The rest of the TAC, those who expressed a preference between those two options were preferring option 3. But ultimately, as a group, the TAC agreed that this body, the policy committee, should decide which option goes forward. So this is my last slide, and this just compares the 3 options that we went over in my little key over here on the left. So the bright green are projects that are in each of the 3 options are have full funding for their request on the priority list. The olive green color are projects where the funding is split between the priority list and the supplemental list. And then the yellow are projects where the request is fully on the supplemental list. And then lastly, below this dark line is the not funded list. So this box just highlights where the differences are. Like I said, there's a lot of similarities between the options. The differences between option 2 and 3 just really revolve around Orchard Heights and Fisher Road. As mentioned, just through our discussion with the TAC and where we've kind of built on this whole process, we feel that option 2 or 3 are both like, options that will work in terms of the project funding and could move forward. And then we haven't made a formal recommendation, but if we did make a formal recommendation, I think it would be at this point would be option 3 to move forward. That's the last slide. So if there's any questions or specifics we want to talk about projects or how we arrived at the list, for those if possible.
Don't know all the comments, but is it typical in this study that when you have a list of projects like this, there's different options to consider? Or is this, how do you determine, I guess? And if this is something that should be saved for onboarding, that's fine.
Let's just answer, yes, there's a process, and usually it's a long process of narrowing things down,
Okay.
resolving into smaller and smaller options. The final decision by the policy.
Okay. So the option 1, option 2, option 3, it's just different recommendations.
Different, no, not recommend, different options for the
Options.
policy to choose between.
Okay.
No similarities between them.
Yeah.
Starts with our evaluation criteria, and then from there, once our technical advisory committee has used the evaluation criteria to score the projects, we utilize that score as well as things like the distribution of projects between project sponsors, the geographic distribution, internal preferences. City of Salem, I think, had 6 applications, and they have preferences on which ones they think want to move forward sooner or later, and that may not reflect perfectly with the scoring that the TAC had. So we combine all those factors and then just get feedback from our committees and go from there.
Sounds like a lot and it sounds messy. Thank you.
You've only seen half.
Okay, only half.
Maybe we could just describe for, I don't know how to title you, Member Fuller, what happens from here? So like we select a project here, and then where does it go and how does it end up? And
You like the draft, developing the draft and adoption
Right.
later on.
I don't know, I think maybe we're done with public comment, but maybe there's a round of public comment on the project still to come. Yeah, so I think if we could just kind of sketch in some of that, show her how it gets to the finish line.
Yeah, so this is the decision point for our SKATS discretionary funding. There are other funding streams that are incorporated into the TIP document. We're gonna, I think, actually very soon get a list of projects from ODOT that they're funding with the federal funds that ODOT has discretion over. And our transit district is a direct recipient of funding from the Federal Transit Administration. So those projects will be incorporated as well. And once we have that information, we're going to be developing a document, which is our report to meet all the federal requirements, and it'll discuss our process for project selection. Be working on that throughout the fall, and then we will come back in I think probably February timeframe, February, March. That's when we'll do a public comment process. We'll ask the policy committee to release the draft TIP at that point, and put the draft out for public comment. And then we'll ask for adoption in May of 2026. So it's a long process.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question, I don't think we talked about this too much last time around. Can you, if the staff has a concept of the day comes and we, after all this is adopted and lo and behold, we have $3 million extra to assign to perhaps a supplemental illustrative project. Can you walk us through what you think the decision-making process would be are these prioritized and we would take them, or you'd come back to the policy committee and say, hey, let's hash out what is most deserving at this point?
Yeah, I have this actually, an additional slide that sort of talks a little bit about timeframe. As far as the supplemental list, we weren't thinking that we would prioritize those at this point, but we're here in August making our decision, our preliminary decision about the priority and the supplemental projects. We're very soon going to find out about redistribution funding from ODOT. They put in a request for about $70 million this time around. So if they're successful, SKATS will probably receive something like $800,000, $750,000 that we could use for projects. And we should be finding out about that very soon. We could, if we get redistribution and there's other changes, we could revisit the supplemental list. We could revisit projects sooner, but most likely we will probably come back at some point in the fall with the discussion about redistribution. But on here on the timeline, we also have the May approval of the document. In July is when ODOT will approve their statewide transportation improvement program, which mirrors our TIP document. You'll see it we planned out for next year when redistribution will come up again, and we potentially receive redistribution in 2026. One of the bigger question marks is this bullet point is the next federal transportation bill. So there may be reasons to make some changes to some projects before then, especially if there's cost increases or immediate needs. But we may not really know a lot more until we get to the expiration of the current transportation bill. It could be, we could have continuing resolutions. We could have a totally new bill that looks different. We just don't know at this point. And
I'd like to add
go
that.
ahead, go for it.
Yeah, so here we are in federal fiscal year 25. Federal fiscal year 26 starts October 1st. And we have a number of projects that are going to construction or have a phase due in 26. And just like you've probably experienced in your time here on the PC, projects come in and say, oh, we need extra money. So if $3 million plopped in our lap, we first say, well, what's the biggest need? And City of Salem said, oh, my project, was about to go to bid, but now it's going to cost an extra $1 million. There'd be that kind of discussion first at the TAC level and then the policy committee, because the policy committee direction is to complete projects. So we want to complete projects that are in the pipeline, to finish them up, make adjustments as needed. And then we could look at these new projects and see, okay, do we have enough excess money to fund anything else or an extra phase, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many big question marks in my mind in the future years that we have to proceed with some caution, but we want to make the best use of the funds at the same time. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so, because we always try to complete the projects and get things across the finish line. My question is, when I look at option one, I just want to make sure I understand. That was where we were in our last meeting. And the numbers, the 2730 total of 14.5 million. Can you explain to us, Steve, a little bit about the change of what those two numbers, the 2732, and when you go down to option 3, and what does that mean with those numbers now being 17 and 24? Actually, so that's the whole 35. We had 35 million, I thought. 36 million, something like that.
28 was the for the first 4 years. I'll just focus there for a minute. And then 44 for the 6-year period. But those don't include that. That's the amount before we take any funding away for like the regional programs, like the Safe Routes to School program, the Regional Traffic Control Center, the Transportation Options Program, and then some funding for the MPO planning. So way back on an earlier slide, I can flip back to it, but the numbers that we used as our goals when building our project list were this 20.3 number. And then if we're going to look at it in the 6-year time frame, the 31.3 number.
Yeah, it gets complicated because we set these kind of initial targets for a 4-year period and then 2 years extra. And then as we are developing these options, we recognize even some of the projects in the bright green, they're not going to be finished in the first 4 years. Their construction year is 31. So if you see option 3 that says the 2730 total is 17 million. There's going to be some millions that are going to go into 31, 32. That's why the next number says 25. So if you were looking at this in a spreadsheet and saying, what are all the costs per year and how do the projects line out? You'll see some projects are funded in 27 to 30, and then the construction 31, 32. We didn't want to overcomplicate this by showing you these detailed spreadsheets, but those targets were an initial target. Doesn't mean we have excess money. To really distribute.
I guess my question is, should we be concerned with the tax comment about reducing flexibility? Going from option 1 to option 3. What do they mean by that? And can you explain in dollars or whatever, what that flexibility would be?
Yeah, I think so. So it basically, what we're focusing on there is how much we'll have in reserve as like unprogrammed funding. So how much of our revenue have we not made a decision on? So option 1 is there's more of that revenue that we have not made a decision on because there's fewer projects on the priority list. Options 2 and 3, there's slightly less of a unprogrammed or reserve funding. And so it's essentially with option 2 and 3, we would have, I sort of did a rough calculation earlier, about $5 million unprogrammed or reserved at that point, because we have our 2 million. It's very rough.
What do we have? What do we have with option 1?
17, 14 and a half, probably about 7.5.
Yeah. And that's the money that we use with inflation, et cetera, when somebody comes back and says, I'm trying to get this done.
Correct. Yeah.
We can't get it done with the existing funds, so we could take that money and add it to
We
that.
would use that, and we would also use redistribution. So if distribution comes in favorable, we'll get about $800,000 in addition for this upcoming federal fiscal year that could go towards a project that's requesting additional funding. Yeah, we typically try to use redistribution first for that because there's an incentive to use that quickly.
And then just Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And if I'm kind of looking forward and looking at these numbers, if we have on our illustrative projects 11.812, but those have already had some commitment up here and they're on our the next time around, if we had the same amount of funding available to us, we would only have 10 million or so to work with in terms of selecting our projects.
Honestly, it's so hard to say because the future.
But if we had the same amount of money,
If
if
we-
we had 20 mil next time around when we did this.
Basically forecasting about $8 million a year in federal funds, divided into like 4 different programs. That's our forecast going out all the way to 2032. We don't forecast past that. So we'd have to look at what's available in those next TIP. But I can tell you, looking at this even rough spreadsheet, we're kind of committed to almost all our funds out to 2032. There wouldn't be a lot of extra funds.
Discretionary after that, and we skipped our last tip. We didn't add any projects last time around.
That's right. We didn't add any because all the.
Folks that weren't here, there's just been such cost
Yeah.
inflation and volatility.
Yeah, we just, as a group, you decided, let's finish the projects in the pipeline and not add anything new. Now we finished most of those projects, or a good portion of them. There's a
Right.
few still left out there.
So we have a nice opportunity right now,
Now's the
but
opportunity to kind of say, what's the next
Get
set of
used to it.
projects? And what's the next set, and then just make progress. I see this more, well, this is a decision point. I see this group, continually coming back and checking in to see how are we doing the projects? How's the funding going? You know, how's federal funding going? How's the redistribution funds going? Were any programs eliminated? What's our financial situation? And making the necessary adjustments. Adjustments could be positive or negative. It might be, oh, we have excess money and we could add a fund, or we have excess money in this project that is now escalated. We can afford to put that money to that escalated project. On the flip side, it might be, so many projects escalated, we may have to postpone the project that's on this list. Or the funding didn't come in because the federal government cut back. Or we're just not getting redistribution funds anymore because ODOT changed their mind on that. So there's so many question marks, but there's the ability to continually change this tip in the years going forward. So I wouldn't be overly worried that, we're not going to get it right this time. If you feel comfortable with these options, we recommend just selecting which of these options you feel best about it. And we'll continually look at these set of projects and make the necessary adjustments, working with your TAC as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, this is included in your packets, but this is just an overview, cursory overview of projects that are in the current TIP document and where they are. We'll be updating this as we go, but it gives a sense of where some of these projects are. I think it's the first 3 projects all have construction phases that are going to take place in 2026. And at this point, we don't expect a request for additional funding on those projects. That could change, but we don't expect it. On the Center Street Lancaster project, we do expect, I guess that one's in 2026 for construction as well. We do expect that, we're talking with the engineering staff at Marion County, we're expecting they're likely to make a request for additional construction funding on that project. Connecticut, we do not expect at this point any additional request. Same with the Commercial Street project and the State Street project. The second last one is the one where the county just backfilled some of the construction funding to fill a gap that was in the right-of-way phase. So these can change, but this is kind of where we stand right now with our anticipated.
To put a finer point on it, if we choose option 1, option 2, or option 3, are you saying that the money that we're not allocating through that's what these groups would be, these projects would come and tap into?
Potentially
$1 million that we leave over the 7.5.
If they get to the construction phase and there's they're getting bids that are higher than expected, and we don't know that that's going to happen, but it's what's happened in the past few.
Okay, just trying to see how all the
Yeah.
pieces fit together.
And Counselor and the committee, even more complicated than that because
Well,
we
don't
have
tell
to do it
me.
year by year. So you say, there's $4 million we haven't allocated. That's over the 4 years of 27, 32. But we have to make sure we are financially constrained in 27 and 28. So we may have to make various shifts along the way.
So I'd like to address just a couple of thoughts, if I may. Actually, contingency funding. So, and I see you there in the room there. You have a really good feel. What is ODOT? What is the rate of contingency funding ODOT is putting on projects today? Is it 30, 40% for cost overruns?
I'm glad you asked that because I was looking at all our project applications. So this is your project applications that your staff put together. And almost all of them are using a 80% contingency on the construction side. So they made their best estimate of construction and then they add 30% to that construction contingency. Now, that doesn't mean it's all covered because we've seen estimates before that had contingency, but still needed more money. So there's only so much contingency, I guess a local government feels like including, and 30% seems to be the typical one we see. I think for the paratransit, no, I'm sorry, it was the South Salem Transit Center, it was a 20% contingency for that one. That was the one I didn't see for the 30%. So there's contingencies, but then there's just escalation. So.
Yeah, I just like to address that. For ODOT, like, we're at 30% contingency at 50% plans. But then as we move through the design, that contingency goes down. So when we go to bid, typically our construction contingency is like, it's not very high. It's not 30% for ODOT projects. I don't know the exact number.
But the cost, overall cost gone up.
Yeah.
As you continue to design it and,
Sure,
yeah.
sure, yes.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Absolutely.
sure these numbers, that I'm understanding these numbers, the option one, we're saying we have $8 million a year for 6 years, right?
That's our
48 million.
the forecast we're using.
$48 million. We had projects that were 36 million. These numbers are right. So we had about $12 million contingency, which is about a 33%. Am I reading this right?
Where's you said 36 million in there?
If you look at the option one,
Reshare let me reshare my slide.
where we were landing the last time we were together.
Right here.
Yeah, I got it right here on my computer. Option one, I got the 14.5 and the 21.6, right?
Yeah.
It's not 36 together.
Yeah, we wouldn't add those to, the 21 already includes the 14 million. So the 14.5 million is.
Oh, 27 or 32, okay.
Yeah.
So that's the 21.
That's when you add the next 2 years. So it's just covering 6 years instead of 4
Okay.
years.
All right, so then it's of the 48 that's, we're saying 21 is gone. Correct.
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
But just to put a finer point, so yes, 48 million
That's true.
in new funding, this is our forecast. But we're funding all those programs, the planning programs, transition option programs, so you gotta leave those out. And then we have a bunch of construction projects in 2027 that are not on these lists, but we still have to fund them.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is what is that number? What's the number that we have in contingency from the 20, if it's 21 million over the 6 years, right? That these these projects up above, what were we saying we would probably have in contingency without adding option 3? And then what would we have in contingency when we add option 3? My concern is we know this inflation, and like you just said, as we get closer to these things, they cost more money as we go forward. So I want to make sure we're not piling a bunch of things on here that we're going to say here and be going scraping, taking them off.
I guess I'll just, my thought on it too is that I'm also hearing that one of our projects here has a 30% contingency. So the commercial street, I won't pick on anyone except Salem. We're saying it's going to cost 4.7 million to do the commercial street urban upgrade. 30% of that projected cost is contingency.
No, just on the construction phase was so there's phases to projects. There's
Okay, so
right away and construction. The construction phases all have a 30%.
well, we hold contingency in the projects themselves, and then we hold contingency
At the MPO level.
at the MPO level, and we publish to the world how much money we have set aside for these projects. And then the bids come in and match how much we publish to the world. And then we're surprised when the prices are inflated. Yeah.
Well, we do publish this.
Sorry, like that just.
As a contractor, that's what I'd do.
Like common sense.
This is true everywhere. This is true everywhere. It's not
I know.
unique to our area. Local, federal, state, so.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, these projects, to be honest with you, the only ones I'm really familiar with are Delaney street improvements, I can see that corner from my mailbox and then the Battle Creek Bridge and then Almsville. I drive through there all the time. Well, I did before the highway was shut off, but.
Yeah.
So I'm in favor of option 3, and I'll tell you why. We discussed this last time about the paratransit. Now, these vehicles ain't gonna get any cheaper. We don't have a crystal ball, and I want to make sure we serve that demographic. And one thing I am concerned about though is I'm not a big fan of all EV. I'd rather they buy at least a hybrid or fossil fuels, what time would go.
Yeah,
And because you probably get it for cheaper than EV too.
well, these are,
We don't, forgive me, but
No.
that's strictly gonna be your board decision on
Mhm.
purchasing that, correct? Well, that's what I would hope, that they look at that, at least look at it.
yeah, understood. I don't believe we have any paratransit vehicles in our fleet that don't operate on fossil fuels. We're not able to procure, because we have US made requirements in our procurement around, buses that serve in this capacity. Not able to get those manufactured.
Thank you.
Yeah, the ones that transits are asking for are CNG.
Are they?
I believe they're CNG paratransit. Gasoline, oh, sorry, gasoline.
Yes, I think those little paratransit buses,
Gasoline, they're not EVs.
hook them up to
They're
the.
gasoline powered.
Yeah.
Paratransit.
He's on the call.
Well, Commissioner Cameron, I just want to tell you thank you. That's where I was going with that question on contingency and moving forward. The nice thing about these lists that we're creating here is that supplemental illustrative projects, they're there and they're recognized. And we do come up with extra money. These projects are already on the list. We can grab one and pull one up at any time. But and right now as a county, as we're putting out our bids, they're all over. Some of them are coming in lower than we expected, and some of them are twice what we expected. So still moving forward, there's no rhyme to reason of costs going ahead. We've always been very conservative, and that's where I like to lay is I like to be able to add projects instead of have to cut them. When you cut them, it's really hard. So any more thoughts on that?
For my response there is, I think the question between option 1 and option 3 is just how much we want to, at this point, leave in that contingency at this level. And the other thing that I feel like is that after it's kind of skipping around of awarding projects, I think there's also a positive benefit of demonstrating to the community that these projects can get finished and we can choose new ones. And I think starting some of the projects that we've added in option 3, even if it's only to do the engineering or partial funding for the paratransit vehicles, I still think it's within that prudent amount of leaving, some contingency while also demonstrating to the public that the money is going to show up in their community in a positive way. So I'm still for option 3 from the seat of Salem.
Sure.
I would like to see option 1, mainly because I would like to wait and see on the paratransit vehicles what the board's going to do on the new payroll tax. If the transit takes another $39 million out of payroll taxes, I think they should be able to buy their paratransit buses out of that fund instead of taking it on roads and bridges. So that's money for construction would be better off spent here than on paratransit vehicles if they're getting another problem. I'd like to ask it, but
Forgive me.
comes out.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question on that?
Yes.
Let's say the payroll tax passes like next week or whenever it is.
Friday the 29th.
Friday the 29th.
Oh, that's the other one.
Yeah. Well, could we come back and revise this when we had an assurance these buses would be? I just want to serve this demographic. That's all I want. And these vehicles are getting more expensive. You don't want them breaking down on the road. That God forbid. But my question is, if that were to happen and that money came available, I'm not disagreeing with you. We can get money there. Great. Use this somewhere else. But that can revise this if that were to be the case.
Well, first of all, this is this is not we're not asking you to adopt anything today.
We're not making a motion today.
We're making a motion to develop the draft tip,
Okay.
but there can be changes before adoption if something occurs. So, you know, we can be flexible. The other thing I was going to say was, well, when this came up, I think last month, Director Carney was asked about these funds, and she asked if the new employer tax can be used for paratransit. I think you said it was only for operations, but then I asked your staff.
Yeah, and I was wrong.
And it
Yeah.
can be used for purchases. It can be used to paratransit.
Service overall, yeah.
So,
May I? Thank you. Counselor Duran, you're concerned about not allocating money now because there's a possibility they may get more if a tax passes. Is that correct?
It doesn't, it's just their board.
With their board, okay, I understand. Are there any other projects on this list that may be affected by, I know there's a special session in right now for transportation money to come in. I'm just wondering if you're taking that question like equitably across all these other projects when you look at what funding could come in potentially or not come in later on, or is it just the Chariots one that you're concerned about?
I'm just more concerned about the Chariots because it's new. The federal, the state funding coming down from federal money is, everybody here could be scared of what's going to happen with that because it could change tremendously if things
Well,
don't pass.
but the transportation bill, that's not federal though, that's state.
Right, that's what I said, but it includes federal money. So there's federal money that could be included in that. So, but mainly it's state. So state funding for everything, next month or next week's
Okay,
special session can change things, but that's not what I'm concerned about.
okay.
Except there's a state bill or a special session this Friday. The federal transportation bill, the current one, expires end of September 2026. So a little more than a year from now.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just wondering if that was just a Chariot specific concern of yours or if it was considered.
No, it's mainly the Chariots because that's a potential new tax that we're going to see.
So, okay, thank you.
And I can add on the transportation side of it, it is for operations and maintenance. All of the funding will be operations and maintenance on transportation. And then the transit tax would go up to 1/10 of 1%. It would double it would also help you for operations. But none of this money will go to projects.
right. And you're referring to the state bill proposal.
State bill proposal, yes.
Mr. Chair, do we need a unanimous vote on this?
Eventually, you need a unanimous vote on the tip and adoption.
Not this
Until the
today.
spring.
No, but we sure hope that you have enough consensus that it's leading toward a unanimous vote in May.
Well,
So
forgive me, Mr. Chair, if I may, or
Sorry.
is it okay if I make a motion right now, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Well, I just move we accept, go with option 3 with the underlining statement saying if we read our crystal ball right and all this money comes in, it can shift that fund, and we know we're going to get money to service demographic, which I think everyone in here wants to serve demographic, but if somehow we could move that around if somehow there's some magic money show up. I'll let you wordsmith it, put it in there in your legalese, which drives me nuts, but that's my motion if it makes sense.
Do I have a second?
Go with option 3. Forgive me.
I'll second a motion to recommend option 3.
Okay. So we have a first and a second. Is there any other conversation or comments to be made?
I'd like to make a comment. Mr.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thanks. I appreciate the discussion. And I have consulted with members of the Chariots board, and I believe we would be comfortable moving forward with option 2 or option 3. So I'm glad to see option 3 is on the table. I do think, I can't remember if it was Counselor Duran or Mayor Schaufler, when we had our conversation about the selection criteria in January, directing staff to take on a statistically valid survey. And I would like to see if there are ways that we can get our selection criteria to line up a little better with our project selection, because we had some projects that scored very well with the selection criteria that are not being recommended as priority projects. So I think I would like for us to direct staff to look into the statistically valid survey administration around the selection criteria so that we can have that piece of the puzzle kind of buttoned up by the time we are doing this again in 2 years.
Wait a minute. We have a motion on the table.
we have a
Yeah.
motion.
Sorry, that is
And
kind of
this is
a,
discussion on the motion, so.
this is discussion on the motion because the
Oh.
motion is related to the selection
Okay.
criteria that we
No,
modified. And
you're not asking to modify the motion or.
that's just discussion on the motion.
So this, yeah,
And you, as you, Mr. Chair, if I may, as we discussed,
Absolutely.
and as you're looking at that, don't forget about the equity lens of all the jurisdictions here. And that's why we came down to this, so that Almsville had a project, Salem had a project, Marion County had projects, the bus people had projects. So I think that's really important with this group. And that's where sometimes this group went sideways because we forgot about there's a whole region here.
so I think for our next cycle, we can certainly re-examine the evaluation criteria similar to what we did for this cycle. We can revisit that and make changes as the group would like to. So yeah, I think we're open to that. And then as far as the options that we have in front of us, we really did incorporate the jurisdictional feedback, the sharing. So I think all those factors have gone into this, and it's an imperfect system, as always. But you know, I think what we've tried to do is just demonstrate that we've been listening to our TAC, we've been listening to the policy committee, and then we use that evaluation criteria as our both our starting point, but our guidance as we're going through this the actual selection process.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just want to clarify my motion. I move we support option 3. Just leave it at that. All that other mumbo jumbo glory.
Thank you. So let's
Here's the motion
So-
here.
moving forward, option
Do I have to
3.
read that?
Read that, so.
Oh, do I have to read this
Well,
language?
why don't you direct your question to the chair?
Oh, Mr. Chair, do I have to
Yes.
read this language that you requested?
Well, I think requesting option 3 that was slated to us covers it. So is everybody good with that today? We have it all written in front of us.
So do I have to read this, support option 3?
No,
Yes, we're including
I
the
don't
draft.
believe so. Mike?
Put that in.
Well, just for the record, I would like to get a clear motion.
Yeah.
So, Chair, do you want us to start over on this motion process? Or
So-
clear motion in
I
2 seconds?
can take my motion back if you want.
I think that,
I take my motion back. And then can I start over, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. Let's try it one more time.
I move we support option 3. Then do I need to read this language?
oh, in here?
Directing staff approve projects including.
Yes, I think would be good.
Okay, I move we support option 3 and approve projects for include draft FFY, forgive me, 2027, 2032, MTIP, forgive me again, direct staff to prepare the draft FFY 27. Draft FFY 2027 to 2032 MTIP and accompanying air quality conformity determination.
Second.
Yeah.
Whoever seconds it has to repeat it.
Forgive me, I went to college, so.
Okay, so we've had lots of discussion on this. I think it's time that we take a vote. So all those in favor of option 3, please say aye. And Mike, you have to keep track of it in the room there.
Well, it's, they're voting on the motion, not just option. Yeah, voting on the full motion.
Direct staff.
Right, Chair? They're voting on the full
To
motion.
direct staff, option 3. So all those in favor, go ahead, Mike.
Well, okay, because he's on Zoom, he asked me to help. So, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We have one opposal from Councilor Duran. So just the one? Everyone,
I'm abstaining.
you're abstaining, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we do, this does not, this motion doesn't require a unanimous,
And a majority?
for the majority, because we
Okay.
have, you voted, right? didn't you?
Yeah, I voted.
One,
Yes.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 voting yes, 1 abstention, and 1 no. Did I miss anyone? Yeah.
Is everybody online?
No, there's not. All right.
Okay.
So,
Congratulations, everybody. We got through that.
Yeah. That was a lot of work.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Next up, item H on your agenda, SKATS Public Participation Plan. So, Kim.
All right. Thank you. I know it's a long meeting today. I have, we have a public participation plan, which is one of the required documents. And we last adopted it in November of 2021, and it's on a 4-year update cycle. So it's due to be updated this year by the this was also reviewed during our certification review that came in November, and then our results in March. And there was no corrective action, which is a good thing, but we had one robust recommendation with 11 parts. So there were lots of little details that they did make suggestions to consider in our next update, which was in the pipeline. I threw this up here just a reminder that there's a regulatory background in our CFOs. Plan to ensure robust public participation from stakeholders. And the reason I point this out is because the recommendations that came from our review were, the federal review is very particular and very good at wordsmithing. And so many of the recommendations were very specific. We did not miss the gist of what we've been doing, but it was suggestions to perhaps literally point out or quote the federal rule in the paragraph that addresses what we're doing. So they weren't being scolded, that we were, they embraced our goals and objectives that were already in there, and the overall program that we're doing, and the bucket of tools that we use when we outreach. It was specifics of making sure that we are in compliance with the federal regulations. So again, in your packets today, I have a hard copy that I left all of the track changes in, always a little bit hard to read. And then again, I've marked just with a standout, a pull-out comment, if it's something that was specific to a recommendation from our federal partners. And predominantly, the main changes are to indicate a handful of locations in which we maybe the language said that we were meeting the rules, but it isn't clear for a reviewer, or it's a little bit more robust documentation. So for example, on page 10, they asked us to also indicate that SKATS as the MPO is required to consult with resource agencies, tribal governments, and entities as part of the rules. So we do that. It's inclusive whenever we do our long range plan, our short range plan. But the recommendation was to clearly state that in this documentation. So I have on page 10 and page 11. And another recommendation was that under when we do public participation and we are updating our long and short range plan, to specifically list all of the entities who we reach out to. And that again is something that we already do. So on page 15, I added a paragraph that includes everybody. It's things like it's our not just our standing committees that we work with, but representations from transit, freight shippers, private providers of transportation, users of all public transportation, pedestrian walkways, bicycle facilities, and all of those contacts we do already reach out to. We have on our interested parties email list, we have a mailing list. Jurisdictions. So they've not been excluded. It was just asked for more clarification. So most of the changes in the documentation that I've highlighted were their suggestions for being completely in compliance at a detailed level. The public participation plan itself goes out for public review for a 45-day comment period. And so I brought it to you this month because if you are accept the changes that I have highlighted here, I'll put out a cleaned up document, and then we release it to the public. We put it out on our social media. We share with jurisdictions. We have scheduled to talk to a neighborhood association in October, and that they'll give comment to it. And it gives us plenty of time, a 45-day period. October, I'll bring back any comments that have come about what the document has. And that will give you time to review them in October, see if we'd like other changes, and that we would bring it back in November to be adopted. And that would kind of keep us in our 4-year time. So in a nutshell, that's what I have today. Do we have any questions about what I've gone through and marked up? And as I said, our review didn't highlight anything that they didn't like. They just wanted in a couple of locations.
Any comments or concerns? Do we need to take an action on this today?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you approve that you will release it for public review.
Do I hear a motion?
I motion to approve as presented.
Excellent. Second?
Second.
Thank you very much. The motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any nays? Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Next up, summary of the MTIP modification. Mr. Steve, back to you.
Sure. There's a table in attachment I, which lists the MTIP changes in the last month to the TIP document. There's one that's a full amendment and was reviewed by the policy committee at the July meeting. And then the other numbers 2 through 6 are all administrative amendments that were completed at a staff level. I don't really have any other update on those. There were a couple of them were slipping project phases as we get closer to the end of the federal fiscal year. State Street changes that I had emailed about expediting that process. That project amendment is in there. And then one change to a transit project, just moving funds between project phases, and another curb ramp construction project that had a change for construction.
Okay. Any questions for Steve on this? Is there an action required on this one?
Nope, this is just an informational update.
Perfect. All right. Everybody's getting quiet after that last discussion. Next up, OMPOC meeting recap. Mike.
Yeah, I included the agenda in your packet. So the main items on the agenda for the OMPOC board meeting was a discussion about the OMPOC match proposal. This is the money I mentioned earlier, where the state takes some of the planning funds that go to MPOs and provided it to Central Lane MPO to minister the OMPOC process or meetings. And they didn't spend the allotted funds. I think they were given like $75,000 a year for several years. So there was a number of funds to return. And we later had a meeting that the MPOs preferred having that money returned back to them rather than using it for another proposal, which was to be used for a joint modeling exercise. The state is working on an activity-based model, a computer model for the whole forecasting. So, but some of the MPOs were running very short on funds given their local conditions. So they asked that it be returned for general use. So I'll have probably more about that when we have the final numbers. ODOT talked about the Transportation Safety Action Plan that they have out. They update this plan about every 4 years. And so the last one was done in 2021. And if I don't have it here in the agenda, but there is information about giving public comment about the update. The plan is still being drafted, but they are having meetings to get input from the public. So if you're interested in finding more about that, please contact me. Down in Grants Pass, I don't know how long ago, I think a year or so ago, they did have an electric bus that caught on fire, and got a lot of publicity, and the general manager down there shared some video that showed the bus. He had video of the bus yard, video inside the bus, and they showed how some of the batteries roof first caught on fire and it kind of spread among the batteries, and then they showed the response from the local fire department. So obviously no one wanted that, but you know, looking backwards, they learned something from the experience. That's what you want to get out of it, right? You had a failure, what did we learn from it? So they were fortunate to have parked the buses with good separation so it didn't spread from bus to bus. They learned something about the response they would need, but probably most importantly, they worked with the manufacturer on what happened wrong with the batteries and what could be done to fix it. So that was just happened to one bus. I think they had a handful of other buses from the same manufacturer who came in and made some modifications to the circuitry. I'm not an electrician, so I don't know what it is, but you know, they were able to make some modifications to hopefully prevent this from happening again. And then they shared what happened, you know, whoever wanted to know more. So I watched this, I sent information to Jerry saying, hey, you have electric vehicles and you electric buses. How much do you, this might be something of interest to you to see what precautions they had, what the response is, etc. And then we had a presentation from Travis Bauer at ODOT talking about ODOT's financial situation. As we all know, he outlined the hundreds and hundreds of ODOT staff that may be cut if there is more funding provided. Not just ODOT staff being cut in multiple departments, in maintenance, in planning, and project development, back end and administration throughout the whole department, but also consolidation of stations, maintenance stations. I'm looking at you, Anna, but you could probably talk about this a lot more than I can. But they're cutting back on the number of maintenance stations, which would reduce the amount of plowing, snow plowing, road maintenance. So it affects the system quite a bit.
Yeah, 12 out of 22 maintenance stations statewide would be closed.
Yeah.
So for our area, that's Rose Lodge, which is off of 18, great maintenance station. And then on the other, a little bit on the other Sisters maintenance station would be one as well. So the only one left kind of in the Santiam area is a Santiam maintenance station. And so they're not going to add bodies to that. It'll be the same number of bodies at the Santiam station, maintenance station. So it's just going to be slower response to incidences like crashes, slower, probably closed roads if we have a snow event and we can't get up there to plow it. So.
And he also talked about this kind of a reclassification of how frequently you maintain some of the state highways.
Yeah, the level of service for our highways and in the MWAC materials from our last meeting. If you didn't get that email, Mike, okay. We had some maps of level of service in October of 2024 versus future level of service on significant changes. Like level of service for I-5, for example, is level of service A, like that's our #1 priority. but that will drop to a B. And then some roads were E, which were nothing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
Actually.
I think that illustrates the real world effects this would have.
Yeah, 483
Of these
people
reductions.
received layoff letters, so it's pretty significant.
And then
Before you move on, if I may.
Yeah.
I'm not against technology. We're moving forward all the time, and God knows, hopefully better. But I was talking to one of our firefighters in Turner, and when an electric vehicle catches on fire, it takes 75,000 gallons of water to put it out. And Turner Fire does patrol, is responsible for 40 miles I-5, among other items. And they only have a tanker. They have two tankers, one 2,000 gallons and one's 1,500 gallons. And all they do is make sure the fire doesn't spread. They just sit there and let it burn out. Now, I hope that these geniuses or Elon Musk's or whoever in the world get all that figured out, because I know it's moving forward, whether we like it or not, whether I like it. That's a big deal, man. I just want people to be conscientious of that.
And I was just going to finish up by saying he did have a legislative session debrief. He went over what the governor's package is, and increases in the gas tax, registration, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I just got something from the COGS. The COG has a lobbyist, and they shared, a summary of what that proposal is. If anyone wants to see it again, if they haven't seen it in the past, contact me. Happy to share that. But that's the one they are talking about this week, and then going to the in debate Thursday or Friday. That's your
Friday's a special Sunday.
Friday. Says something about Thursday, but I don't. Okay.
Mike, do you know what the proposed gas tax is by chance?
It's
$6 per gallon?
Yeah, it's more, 40 up to 46 cents.
6 cents.
So that's my my update on OMPOC, Chair.
Thank you. I tell you what, while you got that live there, why don't you just go right on through with your informational items?
Yeah, there isn't a lot this month because I knew the meeting was going to be long, so we kind of just left it at a minimum when the next meetings are. And that summary table just basically says where we're at with this MTIP development. So next meeting, the TAC is September 9th, and our next meeting as a policy committee is September 20th. So we won't be Delta too. There's other acronyms that you'll learn about.
I used to work at a place also where we had a jar. We used an acronym we weren't supposed to, it was like 90 days of the new hire coming in. We had to put money in, and then when it was all over, we would, or when that time period ended, we'd use that money to go out after. But
Here we go. I move we do that.
Go out after every meeting. You're not here.
Well, I wish I could have been there in person. I wish you could see the view I've had taking this meeting. I've got a mountain I'm looking at. Beautiful. But thanks everybody for coming. And with that said, we're adjourned. Let's have a great week. We will see everybody next month.
Oh, you can beat up on that.